All right, all right. Good afternoon, everyone. Like we would say at church, greetings and salutations. Glad to be able to come to you one more opportunity to share and to chop it up. This is Keeping It Real with Pastor C.
Great, I love it.
And chopping it up with Hope Mustakim. I got it right. I got it right. How you doing this afternoon?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. First of all, I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this interview.
Thanks for allowing me to be here.
Well, you know, you bring in something to the city, to the community that's much needed.
Right.
And you're running for school board.
I am. It's the at-large position 7. So there's 2 at-large positions that are up for election right now, position 6 and position 7.
And you're position 7?
Yes.
Okay, Keith is position 6.
Yes.
Well, I want you to know this right now so you won't be confused. We only interview winners.
Nice.
We've never interviewed anyone that lost.
I receive it.
We always interview the winners. We speak that affirmation.
Yes.
And that's because we know which candidates to support. That's one reason why when I was asked to do this, I say I would be honored to do that.
Thank you.
You've had a relationship with 94.5. Give me a history of some of the things you've done with the station. I know you had to remind me. It seemed like it was in another life that we sit at the same table at the NAACP banquet. And you look like a little child back then, I guess, you know, but so much has happened since then.
So much has changed, yes.
So just give me an idea of some of the things that you've done with 94.5.
Yeah, well, especially recently, I've been here a lot. I was here for we've been working on the Beat the Vote. So some of the DJs go out a few times a week and get people registered. I'm a deputy registrar, so I can register voters. So we've been doing that. I was on this Saturday night with the Queen of the Co, Mary Jane. We had a lot of fun talking about voting and all the issues. We talked about everything from the King of Wakanda passing away and how heartbroken we were over that. And then we talked about inmates and their ability to vote and how they don't get mail-in ballots most of the time. So it ran the gamut. And then also on the day that we did Stop the Music, and a lot of our local officials came in and we talked about policing, criminal justice reform and all that. I was here with a group of the young BLM activists that we had all organized the protest and the rally for change together. So we had 2 events that these amazing, bright, driven young people from our community got together and they organized these great events, and I was just there to support because I have a history in activism in organizing the city. So yeah, I've been here a lot lately. It's like
wow, so you got a full male jacket with 94.5.
I love it.
And that's a great thing. That's a great thing. Now, let me ask you this. Where is exactly you're running for at-large position 7? What area is that?
So that's the whole, at-large means we represent the whole school district. So instead of just these smaller districts, it's everyone in Waco ISD can vote for position 6 and position 7. So I'm glad that I'm not running against Keith because we saw the opportunity for us to both run and hopefully both get on the board to create some change that's long overdue. So we hope that this inspires people and lets them know that you're not just voting for one candidate and hoping that their voice is loud enough. You're voting for 2 more candidates that can hopefully, you know, make the change that we've all been waiting for.
Now, I'm going to ask you now, a lot of people what is Mustakim?
Mustakim?
Mustakim.
Mustakim, it is Arabic. It means the straight path.
Straight path?
Yeah. So that was
I wish my name meant something. Stimson, it means you owe money, I guess. But let me ask you this. Give me a little tell me something about your background and your education.
Yeah, so I come from South Louisiana. I moved to Texas at 21. So I was born and raised in Cajun country. My family's very Cajun. My grandparents speak French and all that. My parents do too a little bit. But I went to Houston first to help out with the college ministry there with my youth pastors, and just decided to give community college a try. I wasn't one of those kids that I think I had a lot of potential and a lot of teachers and the few who spoke that into me, but I had a lot going on at home. So it wasn't, my best friend was always the one who seemed like she was going to make it through college and make big things, and I was going to go to hair school or some kind of trade where, you know, I knew that I was a non-traditional student. So turns out I gave community college a shot and loved it, and ended up coming to Waco as an intern at Mission Waco because I wanted to work with the youth. I wanted to work with the homeless population and the children's ministry. So I came to Mission Waco in 2009 and got sucked into the vortex, and Waco just became my home in 2009. And luckily, Baylor took me in as a transfer, and I switched over from education, secondary education. I switched my major to social work. So I got about 2 years in secondary education before I switched over to social work, and went back for my master's with a newborn baby because I just I have a lot of energy apparently. So I went back for my master's in community practice social work. So just finished up in 2013, or I'm sorry, 2018.
Well, that's great. It's perseverance.
I had these two in the middle of all of that. So undergrad, grad, babies.
Well, I think that is outstanding because this is the season for women to lead.
I know.
You hear the saying, male ego, you know, like an elephant. Man, I have a male ego like a killer whale. But I do understand that right about now we need the most qualified people in leadership positions. Now is not the time to be male chauvinist or judge a person by their ethnicity, color, creed, religion, or whatever. We need the best candidates, especially with the coronavirus such that it is, and the impact that it has had and is yet having on children. I know we have I think all of my grandchildren are at home doing the home learning. But what do you think that, what's your plan, or how do you think your becoming a part of the school board could help navigate through this?
Yeah, and we don't know because the election is not going to be finished until November 3rd. So, you know, we all pray that this is over by then, but we have no idea yet what it's going to look like in 2 months. So right now, I think my preference would have been just looking at other school districts, the A-B type schedule where kids transitioned back instead of going, you know, either full in person or full online, where they swapped out, you know, 2 days, whatever, just to gradually ease them back in to reduce contact with other kids. That would have been, for me, that's what I hoped for. But, you know, we're just going to make the most of it. I know a lot of our kids are going to be going back in person because parents need to work and they're ready to see their friends. And the only thing that scares me about that is a lot of our grandparents are raising kids. And then a lot of our folks in Waco have underlying health conditions just because we have historically been a city that's not provided health care access.
A nation.
You
say nation. Don't limit that to city.
No, of course. But I think Waco does have a unique history in that we have not served our black and brown folks the way that we should have. And we see the consequences of that now. And so we saw that in the coronavirus, how the numbers, at first they were kind of even, then we saw it shoot up, especially among our Hispanic population. And I mean, a lot of folks just didn't have access to health care. Families are doubled up. You're living with extended relatives. You know, we had graduation that happened. You have birthdays, and it's just, the culture here is very family oriented. So it's really hard to tell people to stay away from family. And so I hope by November it's over, but if it's not, we're just going to keep bringing creativity, innovation, solutions that try to alleviate a lot of the stress that kids and families are going through.
And you know, one thing that a lot of people may overlook sometimes is mental health. Because like with our children, they actually got out of school in March. And so it's time to go back to school and they're still at the house. They actually need to be around other children.
They need that socialization.
Yeah, that helped develop them in that area.
I know.
And I always say this as far as the black and brown community. concerned, if we would unite, black and brown could run the town.
What?
If we can just unite,
like, don't get me started.
get together, because I think combined, if you combine the black and brown, that's not the minority.
No.
And we're treated separately because we're segregated. So, but you know, I don't want to get off on my Malcolm X rant. But
I mean, but it's the typical. It's uniting the working class. You know, the working class, and I think whenever you have a people who have sustained this country, who this country has been built on the backs of, that they deserve a louder voice in politics, in decision making, in leadership. I'm a social worker, so mental health is key for me. Actually, one of my platform initiatives that the number one was having more robust mental health services on campus. So there's that, but I understand the implications of just our parents and working class, the working poor, not having a voice in decisions and leadership and the things that affect their life and their kids' lives every day. You know, so I'm all about that exchange and transference of power. I think there needs to be more equity there, where our parents are honored and valued and seen as the experts in their own situation, because they know their own life better than I do. I'm a social worker, but I'm not here to tell them what is best for them. I'm here to offer resources and solutions and try to help them go from point A to point B. How can I support you? How can I facilitate that? But I'm not here to tell you what I think is best for you or your child.
well, that's great. That's kind of like your philosophy.
Yeah, it is.
You know, you a social worker at school, a social worker on the school board. Imagine the impact that would have when you're establishing policies and stuff like that. And is that social justice? What's your view on that?
Absolutely, equity, and because I know we've, as a nation, have gone from diversity and inclusion, and now we're going more towards equity and people learning what that means. And that is kind of taking an assessment of, we're not all starting off on the same playing field. So Sally and John are going to need two different things. And so equality means you give both kids the same amount of support. Equity means you understand where this kid needs additional supports because of where it hasn't been provided before. And so for social justice, for me, I believe in restorative justice practices from our criminal justice system all the way on down to education. Restorative discipline, we've seen, we have a few campuses who have done that, and it works beautifully with our kids, especially the ones who have been through traumatic situations. Our parents have been through trauma. The teachers are getting trauma-informed care training. And so it's this more restorative justice mindset where we're not going to outcast you and say you're hopeless, we're going to discard you, your next stop is prison. What we're going to say is there's hope, you have potential, you have the ability. A lot of us, children to adults, we just need acceptance, love, unconditional support. I mean, I know that's what I needed when I was a teenager, and I just carry that with me, remembering whenever a kid can be labeled as troubled or disruptive or angry, what it is they really need is a safe place and that person who's real with them. So as far as social justice and education, those go hand in hand, because the ticket out of poverty is education. And I think there's some people in our society that know that, and there's a reason why they restrict the access to quality public education, because they know that the ticket out of poverty is education. And so I want our kids to have the best public education they can have, because we need more equity and equality within the economic society that we live in, Well,
you sound like a mother.
I am a mom.
And that's great. That's what we need, people that understand. A lot of times we have people on the school board that children are grown and gone. They don't really have children going to those schools in that school district.
My kids are Waco WISD preschoolers, so preschool and first grade, so I'm here for the long haul.
I know that's right. Now, what changes would you like once you're elected, because you're going to be elected? I'm speaking that affirmation now. What are some of the things you're going to work at making change?
Yeah, well, for one, I would love to pull in all the relationships that I've built over the past 10 years in Waco with all the social workers, mental health providers, nonprofits, organizations, churches, all these relationships that I use in my work with the Waco Immigrants Alliance and now with the Change Waco Coalition. So all those relationships, tap into that on the school board and say, Family Health Center, they're willing to provide a mental health worker 3 days a week on this campus. This place, you know, these MHMRs. So kind of doing that assessment of where all of our assets are in the community and plugging that in, because there are providers who would gladly volunteer to provide counseling, group sessions, therapy, family sessions on campus, but sometimes they're not being allowed on campus because different administrators have different views about the importance of it. And so for me, one of the first things I want to do is make it across the board that we prioritize mental health and don't see it as a luxury or, you know, just a little fluff thing we do on the side, because a kid needs, if they need that support, they're not gonna be able to go into the classroom and sit down and learn and think and focus, you know? So that for number one. And number two, I recognize how many of our families in Waco ISD, English is their second language. And I would love to make our Spanish access, language equity, like just more robust. Because a lot of times what I've seen on campus, I've been a substitute teacher before, and I've been a social worker on campuses before, an intern, and I see you have a librarian or a cafeteria worker or a custodian doing translations and interpretations, or the child is doing it for the parent in their own conference. And I think we just need interpreters, translators to be more readily accessible to our campuses, because then you'll have more family engagement. We know family engagement is critical to the campus. So how can we engage that 20% of our parents who really feel like they don't belong or they're an inconvenience or a nuisance? And we want them to know they're not a burden, they are an asset, we value them. So that's the second thing I would add. And then I have about 10 of them on my website, but I'll just...
You know, you brought that, I want you to hit on the immigration here, but I want to make this, you know, statement as far as being bilingual. I do missionary work. I was going down to the Rio Grande Valley down there at Port Isabel and Brownsville, and I started taking Rosetta Stone Spanish. And I started telling my grandchildren, I said, y'all need to learn Spanish. If you're going to be in Texas, you need to learn Spanish because it increases your marketability.
Yes, all over the world.
Yeah, it increases your marketability. And so I kept telling my granddaughter, she says, Big Daddy, I've been taking Spanish for 3 years. And I said, I didn't even know it, but I think that's important because a lot of people, I don't want to learn how to speak Spanish, but you become more marketable. And you work with immigrations, explain that.
I do. So for the past 10 years, I've been involved in the immigrant rights movement or immigrant justice after my own family went through an immigration ordeal. Basically, that was my open door, my experience that catapulted me into learning about policy. Before, I thought I was going to be a school social worker. And then when my family got in the mix, I was like, wow, policy, what is this macro idea of policy? And that's when I got interested in policy and went over to community practice. But whenever we were in the detention center, I saw that our family had a lot of access to money. We were English speakers, both educated. We had.
Now wait, back up. Your family was in a detention center?
Their father, yes, in 2011.
What?
So it was that.
I'm upset now. So explain.
It was that intersection between criminal justice and immigration, where when you have, and this isn't specifically his story, where we don't want to throw a pity party for him because he was a recovering addict who owned up to his past mistakes. But what we did see was the over-policing and criminalization of communities of color would channel people either to the prisons or detention centers and then deport them. So our experience, we really accepted that, hey, when he was younger, he made some mistakes that 6 years later came back to haunt him. We lived through it, we fought it, we won the case, he stayed, and he's now a citizen. But what it did was open our eyes to all the other families who didn't have the access that we did. We had an attorney, I was a social worker, I could fundraise. We had people fighting for us on a national level. We had Huffington Post, Al Jazeera covered our story because he was a green card holder for 25 years who went through a drug use in his 20s, and in his 30s they came to deport him. They said, oh, we were supposed to deport you 7 years ago, whoops. And he's like, well, I'm married now, I sponsor other recovering addicts, I work full time, we just bought a house, I've done everything that I can to rehabilitate. And they said, yeah, well, that's just how the laws are. And so he was in a detention center for 10 months. But it was hard, we were a newlywed couple, and we were meeting through a glass, and our first anniversary was through a glass. But what it did was show me, you think this is hard? you don't have a baby on your lap. Y'all don't have kids at home. I had all the time in the world. I was in college, but I had all the time in the world. I didn't have babies crying for dad. I didn't have, you know, these confused. And then so what I did when he came home, just committed to not forgetting those 2,000 people back in the detention center and how most of them were coming from this area. And so I learned about policing and the ties between law enforcement and ICE and all about
that. We can spend all day, and I would just,
my goodness,
you'll see the hair stand up on my back when I think about how dare them treat, separate families, how insensitive and how much racial hatred goes into that, as if you're born over here, you're perfect. These serial killers that's born, these domestic terrorists, these young white boys going into churches, killing black folk. Young white boy down there last week just going to shoot somebody, and they giving him a drink of water, then arrest him. As a black man, I had a license to carry. Let me walk downtown with my AR-15.
Right.
All of this stuff, and they wonder why we feel like we feel. Well, we can beat them at the ballot.
Yep.
We can beat them at the ballot.
Yep.
We can change it at the ballot. They don't want to release that power and that authority, and they don't want to see us united.
Yep.
And if we unite, we can have full representation of people of color, black and brown, and everybody.
And poor whites too.
That's right.
Because I come from that background, South Louisiana. I grew up in a trailer park, and we had hand-me-downs, everything. My dad was in the oil field, and my dad currently is in prison in Gola State. So a lot of people look at me and they don't know. When you first look at me, you think, oh, she went to Baylor or whatever. Like, I relate to a lot of our teenagers, a lot of our families having family members incarcerated and all that, and coming from relative poverty, American poverty. But the thing is that I've watched poor whites, such as my family, buy into the narrative that if you support such and such candidate or political party, it'll benefit you. Or if you belong to this one, it's a tribalism, a cultish almost mentality, an othering where you got to protect your own. But I was like, you know what? We're actually being sold a lie, and it's hurting all of us, because our liberation is all bound up in one another's. Because I'm not free until you're free. And so I think that a lot of times people get freaked out, white folks get freaked out when they hear about black and brown unity. What they don't realize is that they have a lot to gain in that too, because when I trust the leadership of black and brown folks, and I don't have a fear that retaliation is in the heart and spirit of these people. Because when you have lived in an oppressed state, you just want to live peacefully and free and with opportunity. And no one's worried about retaliating. And, you know, that's the whole message of the movement we see in our country right now, is just let us live.
Oh, yeah. Now, my sister married a Hispanic guy, and they have 3 lovely children. And I would say that's one of the best things that happened to our family, because he've always worked and taken care of the family and never had any issues. And I know we're about out of time, but there are a lot of people that are watching right now, and they want to know how can they contribute to your campaign, because I know you got plenty of money. You don't need money.
No, like I said, I don't come from money.
Yeah, you know, the Baylor girl, you got plenty. But how can somebody contribute to your campaign?
For sure.
What do you need?
I mean, I'm a social worker for a nonprofit, so I need all the help I can get. I don't really roll around with elite people or powerful people, wealthy people. This really is a campaign for the people, by the people, honestly. And so if y'all want to support Hope for WacoISD.com, that's the number 4, Hope for WacoISD.com. You'll find my bio, the platform, the 10 things that I would love to change, that we will change, and a donate button. And so I have yard signs, T-shirts, masks, everything, so you can represent. I know we don't get to see a lot of people right now because we're all socially distant, but any support, if you just want to tag me on social media, I really want our young people and our young parents in Waco ISD to know that they have someone championing for them. And that this isn't politics as usual, it isn't business as usual. You've got some candidates that are running right now that really, really, really are passionate about change. So now's the time. You know what?
I know we're getting ready to conclude, but I want to say this. I root for people like you, the underdogs, who had to climb the rough side of the mountain. Yes. And a lot of people did. We say at church a lot of time, you see my glory, but you don't know my story.
Preach.
You know, and what you've gone through to get where you are today. It gives hope to other people. Hope to other mothers, hope to other immigrants, hope to people who have been outcast, hope for situations that appear to be hopeless.
Right.
And so we want to appreciate you this afternoon.
You.
And you want to say one last thing before you go?
I would say your voice matters. Your voice matters. I don't want anybody to sit home thinking, what is my little vote going to do? Because this is an election where you get to choose school board, city council, state rep, congressional rep, president. You get to have 12 different votes that count. So bring you, your family, your friends, get registered before October 3rd. Get in touch with me personally if you need to register. But this, you just got to come out and vote. Your voice matters. It really does.
Hey, I'm all in on flipping Texas, turning Texas blue.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, God bless you. I'm going to be praying for you. And
thank you.
I'll be around, and I definitely will be donating to your campaign. All right.
Thank you.
Want to appreciate everyone for joining us today. Go to hopeforwaco.com.
Hopeforwacoisd.com.
Hope for Waco ISD. And get the rest of the story. Thank you for joining in this afternoon. Be blessed.